going to be recording this call, so that we can share with everyone afterwards. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. Let us know who you are and what cleanup you lead. And while you do that, I do want to mention some friendly reminders if you are planning a cleanup event coming up and you haven't registered your event, please visit our website and you can register your event there. We also have a bunch of other organizer resources, such as our Cleanup Organizer Handbook, volunteer recruitment guide, fundraising resource guide. We have so many different things that can be of support. And then also by registering your event, you can submit a request for free trash bags. So thank you for everyone who submitted questions to the RSVP form. And during this discussion, we're going to be discussing answers to those questions and having like a deeper discussion. And so please share. I'm going to add the questions to the chat box, and then we can get started. So I'm gonna just add all of the submitted questions to make it easier on me, and we'll go over them one by one. So the first question or inquiry from an organizer is they would like to hear about efforts for ongoing maintenance of sites, including fines and policing, etc. Because of the position I have with American Rivers at this time, I am not working directly with any groups that are doing those things, but I do have some research on studies that have been done. We did a lot of analysis on this last summer, and we also have a discussion that talks about some of these, the behavior change and fines and tax allocations and all of that kind of stuff. Philadelphia, and as part of that, Philadelphia did a study from 2017 to 2018 and found that sites with fewer bins leads to more litter. I'm happy to share more information on the research if anyone is interested. But does anyone else want to share?
What you need is
their ongoing any efforts that they've done to help maintain sites, working with municipalities on maybe more trash cans, policing litter, fines, signage.
the river flows this way, down the rock. And what do you fuel is right this way.
I appreciate that. I believe that was my question. I would be interested in anything that you could send me, because I do cleanups here, but it gets frustrating how quickly the stuff slides back. Really, really depressing.
I'd also appreciate anything. We've got the same problem in the city.
I had 3 kids help me just on my street here this week, and they wanted rubber gloves, which I said, oh, come on, just pick it up and you'll wash your hand afterwards. Anyway, we did the pickup. And then when I went out later in the day, I found some of the dirty rubber gloves in my own driveway, which means they obviously haven't learned anything about picking things up and what's not biodegradable. I just couldn't even believe it.
We actually have to supply gloves because they also run across things you wouldn't want a kid to touch.
Yeah.
We also about hypodermic needles, like not to touch. I'm just, if they can identify the site, and we will call and get them picked up, but those are really dangerous and increasing in our parks.
thank God I don't have to deal with that. I just find that, especially if you're picking up micro trash, bottle caps, cigarette butts and stuff, I find it just easier to use my bare hands and then wash up
Yeah.
afterwards. The other thing is I have one of those trash sticks, which they think is fun to pick up with. And I guess it is, but again, it slows the process. And when we're doing our street, I just try to move quickly.
Yeah.
Guys, save it for when you got to reach over a fence or deep into a bush. I said, it's a tool with a purpose. It's not just, for fun. If you can bend over and pick something up, just pick it up. Let's not make it harder.
I know. I actually did a Earth Day cleanup last week, and I was trying all sorts of ways to make it fun. I mean, we had rewards. We had a list of the top 10 things you find on waterfront cleanup. And I basically said the only difference is that it hasn't made it to the waterfront yet. Next week, we'll do the waterfront. But basically turning it into sort of a game and having them count things like bottle caps and that kind of stuff.
I like it. I'm going to steal that.
Good. I like that. Thank you. I'm complimented.
Yeah, well, I'm doing one tomorrow, and I do think that that's an important element of it.
The list. You can get a list. Just Google top 10 ocean finds or something, or oceanfront cleanup finds. There's a list of the top 10. So if you sort of start off and say, these are the things you might find, that you're most likely to find, like number one, obviously cigarette butts. And then basically in my park, for example, on the top 10 list is plastic bottle caps. Well, we don't have plastic bottle caps because there's so much beer drunk in our parks. It's all metal bottle caps. And then things like straws, you can then use it to educate them about, just refusing straws and things like that. So they get really excited. I had kids come up and say, can I have one of those grabbers? Can I go out now? Which you don't often hear.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the adults think that their kids aren't going to like things that their kids actually love.
Huh.
And the scavenger hunt has both the kids and the adults excited. And a friend of mine had done some dumpster diving, so got a whole lot of beautiful free books like Seed by Seed and all sorts of nice books about growing. So we gave those as rewards.
And that's good, because for tomorrow, I visited 2 scout troops this week, and I sent a personal letter to 22 of our local churches.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I only heard back from a couple of churches that called to ask a couple questions, but they mentioned sharing it with the kids. So I'm hopeful that I get a bunch of younger people this time.
Take a lot of pictures, advertise it afterwards, and you'll get more the next time.
I hope so. This is my second time doing this. The first time I sent 44 personal letters to all the people around this little section of stream that I live on, figuring since they live here, they've got skin in the game, they'd be interested. And that was a failure. Not only were the people that live right here not interested, there was also a lot of them don't even speak English, I've discovered. So that didn't go well. So personal letters just to the local residents wasn't the way. So that's why I moved to scouts and churches now.
We did this last year. We translated all of our organizer resources into Spanish. So if you do run into that, where that can be a great resource for anyone that's interested, that's working with
I need that.
Population.
I do need that, because if you don't have it in the native language, that's like saying you're not really invited, you're not included. I know I mentioned on a call here before that I found signs on Amazon that said, please do not litter in both English and Spanish, because, you got to speak to the audience. And I'm going to say half of my street doesn't know a word of English, like really. And I don't know any Spanish. So it's an amazing week, but we do communicate. I bought a custom Dominican cake from a lady on the street that makes cakes in her kitchen. And
out of curiosity, where do you live?
For me, I live in Haverstraw, New York.
Okay, because I have the same issue in Inwood.
Yeah, I'm right up the Hudson River from New York City, about 1 hour. And then I'm specifically focused on this tributary, the Missinongo Creek, because I happen to live right on a little piece of it here. I actually have a grander plan. This year, we're just doing the section in front of me, but I've mapped out the stream all the way from the headwaters to the Hudson River. And my grand plan is to go find someone like myself that lives at each of these 20 locations all the way to the headwaters, and enlist them to go and do what I'm doing now. Next year, you write to a bunch of churches or Girl Scout groups, and you get a crew of 20. And that the idea is that next year we're blitzing this entire stream, the full length from the headwaters to the Hudson on one day here. So we'll
Wow.
get there. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
Also, these I had not done a translation type of project like this before. We did one this past year, and it was all done by volunteers that were bilingual. So if you, again, like if you are working with a population speaking a different language, there's a good chance that someone speaks very good and in both English and Spanish can speaking wise and also writing, and they might be happy to help translate some of your messaging or even your emails. I've seen some Potomac Conservancy in the DC area has a Spanish translation on all of their cleanup event invitations. So it's just really nice to be that they're being so inclusive.
And I do have one neighbor that often acts as a go-between, Kenny. So I think I may have to tap Kenny to help me with this next year.
Yeah.
If I can jump in,
I had a friend translate a book. Sorry.
I was just gonna jump in. Sorry, I got in here late, but I was picking up on what Mark was saying about having difficulty. So we run River Girl Fishing Company out in Todd, North Carolina, and so we do this as a business, and we've had great success with it. But what we've done is we usually give our boats out for free in exchange that they clean up the trash. But what the incentive is for them is they get a prize. So we've had like real estate companies come out to do this as a team building exercise. Usually the families that come out, they send their kids down under the water to get, some of the stuff, but we give them a prize for the most collected, and then they get a prize for the most unique item found. What you could probably do, Mark, is if you team up with some of the local businesses there, you can give those as prizes, and then the businesses get, in return they're doing a good thing. So, they
That's
get some
great.
sort of advertising out of it too.
Yeah, I have to, I approached my local little hardware store here, Zugabee Hardware, and they had no problem a couple of years ago giving me more than enough plastic bags that I still have. I get them from Riverkeeper as well. I actually, to make sure I got people, I posted on our community Facebook page offering to buy anyone a beer at the local industrial arts craft brewery here. And I was happy. I started going through the box that Riverkeeper sent me, and it turns out they gave me 40 slips for one free beer, and it listed all these breweries, and one of them was my local one. So I'm like, all right. I was ready to, I said, well, how many people could really come? Am I going to get 40 people all that want a beer at noon on a Saturday? So I was ready if I had to pay for 40 people. It would have been a lot, but now I'm glad I don't have to. I got 40 coupons. I can't imagine I'm going to have more than that here.
Well,
So.
if you can find out what the folks in your neighborhood that you're trying to reach, what they're truly into, then you can go and get that as, so if it's like groceries or a gas card or something like that, that they would see value in, that they would want to go out and say, okay, look, hey, I can spend a couple hours picking up trash, and if I win, then this is what I get. So.
Yeah, the town is giving away one free shake at our local Wendy's here, I think. I decided to sync my cleanup up with my town just because the rest of the town is doing a community cleanup, and the mayor has helped me before, and he said he promises he comes up for a photo op, and they send their DPW truck around my little loop of stream picking up all my bags. So it just seemed to make sense to leverage the timing that he was doing. So
I might have to come to your neighborhood because I got a bunch of those coupons too, and there's nothing near New York City.
Oh my God. I got lucky. I couldn't believe it. I asked my girlfriend this morning, I said, should I offer to do this, or am I going to get in trouble? But my feeling was some other good citizen would step up if I got really in a hole and we got a ton of people wanting beer, and someone else would cover, or I would just ask the brewery like, hey man, is this the worst problem you have, is that I just brought 40 people in as you open
They're
it.
not stopping at one beer for sure.
Yeah, they're not gonna be mad about that.
Yeah, I didn't think so. So, but it was great. It was like fate intervened, and here I have these. I'm actually going to take. I don't think I'm going to need 40, so I'm going to take half of them down to the mayor, who's got the Wendy's shakes things to give out, and say, hey, if you have some adults that want beer, I'm going to share my stash of beer coupons with you.
Yeah, I'm moving to your town. I'll be
And where are you now?
at the top of New York City in Inwood.
Oh, okay. I haven't explored that area enough. I know you got some good trails. Is that where you're clearing those trails along Spite and Dival there? And
Yeah, we're doing 2 sites. We're doing northern Inwood Hill Park, so starting like Muskota Marsh and doing the whole northern and northwestern, northeastern part of the northwestern, sorry, shoreline, and then we're doing it the southern part of the park, starting at Dykeman Pier and then going up north. So
that is awesome. I mean, so
Yeah.
I lived in Manhattan, then I was in Westchester, so I know exactly where you're talking about. And that area, whenever I come through there on the train, I always look up and I'm curious about exploring in there. And if that's the point you're on, that's such exposure. I mean, think about how many thousands of commuters are taking trains in that little cut there, coming through there.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm so excited. We
Hmm.
just did a big Earth Day festival last week, and so I'm a little burnt out. I got to do a lot of marketing the next week.
I hear you. I'm doing the 5-borough bike tour tomorrow, so you'll see
Oh,
me drive
wow.
by. Or Sunday, I'm sorry. Cleanup is Saturday, 5-borough bike tour Sunday.
Wow.
So the
I look
next,
for you riding by.
so the next inquiry was hearing about other organizations' strategy for event coordination, planning, insurance, volunteer recruitment, engagement, and retention. I did want to, before we have others share, I did want to share a group that I have. So I've been at this job for 4 years, and before that, I worked for 2 years for a local environmental nonprofit doing volunteer engagement and outreach and everything that you would do to get people excited about the environment and engaged. But this group I've watched over the past 5 years, and they have grown immensely since they were founded 7 years ago. They're called Natural Restorations, and they're located in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. It is run just by a woman and her husband. So it's just the two of them. And so I think many of you probably will relate because you're either like a one-person show or you have a very small group or you're doing this all volunteer wise. And I recall in 2017 and 2018, they were really struggling to get volunteers and funding. And over time, they've worked to build relationships with local businesses and schools. So instead of trying to engage everyone, which is what they were doing the first few years, they decided, okay, let's just target these two groups, businesses and schools. And that's how we'll get volunteers and some of this funding and business partnerships. And then because they're located in Phoenix, Arizona, and the terrain there is not always accessible to everyone, they decided to form this dedicated restoration team. And it's solely for veterans that just have come back and are trying to integrate into civilian life. And so that team is focused on performing cleanups and even graffiti removal in hard to reach places where the typical volunteer might have more issue doing. So from there, doing those 3 things, we're working with schools, business partnerships, and veterans, they have been able to grow a lot. And a big reason of this is word of mouth. And on top of that, for their events, they were having events. They have like 10 events every year. And I would say maybe 6 of them are annual events that happen the same weekend every single year. And at every single one of these cleanups, they offer an array of raffle prizes. And they promote this to the volunteers prior. And these prizes aren't like a sticker or like a coupon to get a beer. They're like a Yeti cooler.
Wow.
And like $250 or $500 gift card. And from these relationships, and they've been able to form with these business partnerships, they're able to get a really cool prize for every single event that can be kind of like the leading prize. And then they might have a few smaller ones. And they'll raffle it off to a volunteer for every single cleanup. And all of that buzz and excitement. So some people are coming maybe for the prize of, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a Yeti cooler, which is like very expensive. And then they end up staying and coming back for the fun and enjoyment of the cleanup. And so I thought that was really cool. And I definitely recommend checking out their social media and web pages to see how they are phrasing and acknowledging the businesses that they work with and their volunteers. And it's a lot of work, but I think many of you would be interested. And that's a blog that I wrote about them as like background information, but it has their name, Natural Restorations. And they're on Instagram. They're big on Instagram, and they have a website. So that's what I wanted to share. Does anyone else want to share their strategy for event coordination, volunteer recruitment, engagement, retention?
Well, I sort of mentioned it before. We've been doing this for about 15 or 16 years now. And it's all grown by word of mouth. And it has been, we've only recently started doing social media pushes and stuff like that. But I think, the key in it is those prizes. We give off a free fly fishing lesson and then a free t-shirt. And there's been a couple years that we've partnered with local businesses and we give it up for runner-ups and things like that. And so, you do need, things that they would value or see some sort of value that they wouldn't normally put down a chunk of change for. So the Yeti cooler, but it helps that is key, having the relationships with other local businesses or like-minded businesses who want to have that sort of community support and build. So even like, your local hardware store, Lowe's or Home Depot, they're all into that. And so, they would be more than willing to help either sponsor or give prizes or a gift certificate or something like that. But yeah, we've grown it by word of mouth. And so what ends up happening is that we have folks that fight over the trash, who's bringing in the trash and things like that. And, they've made it a team building event. The realtor offices up here, banks, youth organizations, things like that. And it helps that they don't have to pay for a kayak or a canoe to go collect it. But it's been amazing to see how it's grown over the years. But yeah, you do have to keep at it, and those relationships are key.
In terms of prizes, we have like, I don't know, I think I've probably purchased about 60 of those grip and grabbers. Kids actually like those for prizes too.
I'm sure.
Those are a big hit. And a lot of times when we get a really dedicated volunteer, we'll just say, you know what, why don't you take that home with you? Because we know they're going to use it for the right purpose.
Yeah.
The the other thing is just weighing what you collect, having a way to quantify what they've done. So like at my last event, it was as simple as bringing a bathroom scale out. And when they got back, they'd weigh themselves and they weighed themselves holding what they collected. And they just, they think stuff like that is really cool for kids and for some adults like me. So, but, let them quantify. And as far as building business relationships, I guess, we've been doing this, I don't know, 6 years, but I haven't really explored that to the extent, obviously, that the prior speaker had. But that's on my bucket list for next year's cleanup.
can I can talk a little bit about the Fox Wolf watershed cleanup that I organize. So we do lots of prizes. We have a site leader raffle. So we have 63 site leaders because we have 63 sites. And so we have 3 prizes for our site leaders. We have raffles that we sell tickets for, that helps us, you know, raise funds for our efforts. And then we have raffle baskets that cleanup volunteers can win or enter to win for free at our cleanup picnic. Then we also have a photo contest, and I think there are 6 categories, and every volunteer can win a $25 gift card for winning the photo contest. But I think when it comes to that, you know, it's just you have to ask. That's the biggest thing. And one thing I've noticed over the years is I have a list of businesses that I send a letter to asking for a cleanup prize, you know, talking about the cleanup, talking about how it makes a difference in the community, and then specifically telling them how their prize is going to be used. So that's been successful for me. But a lot of businesses have online portals for requesting donations. And I think that if you don't use those portals, a lot of times they'll just ignore like a handwritten or a typed letter request. So they, you know, they receive a lot of requests over the years. And so a lot of them just, you know, they need you to go that route so that they can keep things organized on their end. An example in my area would be like the Milwaukee Brewers sent me some tickets to baseball, for example. And I know for a fact they had an online portal. So yeah, I think that's just a little bit of advice I could offer there. And then I think this year, every year we raise more money to support our cleanup event. This year I raised $33,000 in sponsorships, and then so it costs that much money to put it on. So that's the thing between staff time and all the supplies. So he talked about trash grabbers. We have 1,700 trash grabbers at our office right now because we try to provide one for each volunteer. Yeah, it's a lot, but I mean, where we order them from, which is ArcMate, if you buy enough, they come out to like $1 something a piece. So it's really actually affordable.
Mhm.
Depending,
You're
you
my
know.
hero. You're like a general there.
So like, but that's one of the things. Another thing is sending a survey, like after you're done doing a big cleanup, like, you know, ask your volunteers what went well, what would work better, you know. So I got really great feedback. Like, for example, I was asked to provide sharps containers for each site because not only are we finding syringes, but, you know, even broken glass and fishing lures, anything that would poke through the bag. So now I bought, you know, sharps containers for each site. Volunteers also said these few sites are always clean. They're not really like a good use of our time. So I removed a bunch of sites this year from our list and added a bunch of new sites.
Great though.
But
If you
yeah,
got some that are too clean to bother with anymore, that's a win.
it's a win. It's like, that's great. Like, you know, we don't need to be there. We don't need to. Volunteers, as I think we all know, they want to show up and they want to feel needed and they want to find trash because that's what they're there for. So if you're sending them to a clean site, that, you know, they're really not actually happy about that. So that's another piece of advice I would offer, is to send out a volunteer survey at the end of your cleanup event, because I have found it very successful myself.
Speaking of supplies and deals, does anyone have know of any companies that offer discounts if you are purchasing bulk supplies for like litter pickers, sunscreen, gloves?
I haven't done that yet.
Okay, that actually made me think of another thing. So again, like I said, for trash grabbers, ArcMate, you can find their website online. And they have, I think it's called their economy pickup tool. And that's the one, I don't know what the number is, but if you buy a certain amount, they come out to like $1 something a piece. And then this company called Ranger Ready Repellent. So it's like a tick and insect spray. They gave me, I think they gave me like 80 bottles of spray for free to use for our volunteers. They're trying to support, and I think they're out of Connecticut. but they're trying to support, you know, any sort of earth-friendly events across the country. So if that's any sort of need for your cleanups, especially if you're doing them different times of the year, I would highly recommend reaching out to them because they will most likely offer you free bug spray.
It's called Ranger Repellent.
Ranger Ready.
Ranger Ready.
And remind me, what area are you cleaning? Where are you located that you're doing that?
I'm in Wisconsin.
West Hampton?
Sorry, Wisconsin, like
Wisconsin.
northeast Wisconsin cities like, excuse me, Green Bay. That's probably one that most people would recognize, Green Bay Packers.
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Kelly. We only have 15 minutes left, so I want to keep going through the questions. Kelly, if you're on the call, I wanted to see if you could speak more about, you had your question about conducting a trash cleanup in a wetland before, and sorry, Kelly Stetner, not Kelly from Fox Wolf. And in Springfield, Vermont. Kelly, are you on the phone?
Hi, I am. Can you guys hear me?
It's a little muffled, but yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hold on. Let me see what I can do here. I just kind of closed my door. It's kind of quiet. We're all very remote here at work, but every now and again, someone will walk into my area and start talking to me. So, so I work full time here in Springfield, and been running the Black River Action Team for over 20 years in my spare time. And we have what I call a legacy trash site, one of probably very, very many in a post-industrial town like Springfield. And the question I have specifically for this group is how to handle trash that is in a small wetland. We can't get to it from the bank side because it's extremely steep. We'd have to rappel down the bank. I was thinking we could try to paddle across from the shopping plaza. It's a nice slow bend in the river, but I don't know. I got to go out there and scout it in kayaks to see if we can use a little beaver channel to get to it. But you know, once we get to it, how do we wrangle this stuff? Tires, buckets. I'm sure there's some furniture down there. How do we wrangle it out? I mean, I have a quote for over $30,000 from a trash removal company that would work from the top with cables and winches and sleds. But I'm trying to figure out how we can pull it into kayaks or make a canoe-maran raft type thing. Has anybody worked with trash in a wetland? And I will go back on mute.
Do you know who owns the land? Is it the city or county?
Yeah, I thought the town did because my Agency of Natural Resources map shows that it's town property. Excuse me, but the town manager and Department of Public Works came out with me to meet with the landowners at the top of the bank because their property line stopped at the top. And town manager got word that actually the whole slope is privately owned by a landowner at one end of the cove. His property kind of curves around the cove, just owning the slope. He doesn't own the top. And of course, the state owns the waterway with the wetlands.
Do you know how deep it is?
I don't. It doesn't look really deep, maybe 6 inches to a foot. I don't know how much of that is mud. I base that on the tires that I can see from the top when I zoom in with my camera. They're not submerged. They're kind of sitting on top of what looks like weeds in shallow water. It's the outside bend of a curve. It's the outside curve of the bend of the river.
If
What's
I'd be
you,
pretty wary of the mud.
I'm sorry, what?
I'd be pretty wary of the mud. It often goes much deeper than you would expect, and people can
Yeah,
get
this
pretty
looks-
lost in it.
I agree.
Right,
I've
right.
sunk half of my body in the mud before because I thought that it was stable ground, but it was not.
Right.
What state are
I
you
mean,
in with this wetland?
Vermont.
I mean, I would probably suggest get some sort of kayak or canoe that you can get to it without having to sink into the mud. You know, the reason I was asking how deep it was so we do our cleanups all along the river, and there are some spots that can be muddy, um, in which situations they wet wade. So if you have like access to just fishing waders that come up chest high, and then your boots, so that you're not getting wet or mud on the inside of it. Um, you but if it's pure mud, then yeah, as Madeline said, you're gonna sink. And depending on how many years of trash has been accumulating on there, I would think your best bet is to have some sort of flotation vessel that you can access it, and then yeah.
Yeah, a
I
vessel
was
that'll
thinking,
like allow you to like basically like use as like a trash can, so that it's not going to get too heavy, that you can still go get out of that area.
Or
right, my
even if you
original
did
point,
it,
You can even
if-
pull something as simple as like a kid's wading pool behind you
Mhm.
and fill that up with trash.
yeah, I was thinking of floating a piece of dock or something along like a very small,
Hmm.
3x4 piece of floating dock along with us, and just kind of park that at the outside of the wetland, and go in with a couple of kayaks and see if we can't, between the two of us, pull out a tire or two at a time, that kind of thing, and then go put it on the floating dock and use it as a barge to get it back out.
Yeah, I think that's your best bet, is to go out like with someone else and just kind of really scout the site and see, like even maybe try to move some of the items and get a really good sense on what not only how deep it is, but also like what equipment you're going to need, how long is this going to take, once you get the items out, what are you going to put it in, how are you going to transport it to wherever, is it to the truck that you have down the waterway, up another bank? Like there's so many different logistic things, and I think that
Right.
when you gather that information, I think that'll be helpful. But I also think that this project will, if you do take on this project, I would recommend getting some volunteers that are like can do this kind of heavy duty, like
Yeah,
lifting
I'm
stuff
not
of thing.
talking
It
about
can't
like,
just be your average volunteer that typically picks up like water bottles. Like this stuff is like, sounds like it's a big job, if that makes sense.
yeah, the 70-year-old retired doctor is not going to help out with this.
Yeah.
The fifth grade high school, the fifth grade class that
Mhm.
does little cleanups, they're not doing this. We're talking like the high school wrestling team and their
Yeah,
coach, kind of a thing.
that's a great idea. Or even like a group of Eagle Scouts.
There you go. Yep. All right, thanks. If anybody thinks of anything, my email address is with the group, so thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Kelly. Another question, or the last question that I would like to address is, how do people handle when river levels are low? Do people walk? How do you take care of the trash pickup? So I'm guessing this is, I'm not actually sure who asked this question. Let's see if I have it here. It was Sue, and I don't know if Sue's on the phone. I don't see her name. So I think this question is like regarding if you are typically going on the river and paddling down it, if the water is super low, do you walk it? I'm guessing like the water's low enough and you have, I don't know how deep the banks are, but does anyone do those types of cleanups, or is it mostly on land, or do you just wait for the water to come back up and then take out your kayak or canoe?
It's definitely easier when the water is up, but for us, the few times that the river's been low, they just use the vessel as the trash can, and they walk it. They have no qualms about getting out and there's the pros and cons, but they do walk it for us if when the river's low.
Do they leave the like, because I'm imagining this, because when I've done cleanups on the water, we pick up as much trash as we can. And then because there's a put in and a takeout section, and that's where at the takeout section, we'll unload all of the trash. We typically can't unload trash like halfway through the float, if that makes sense, unless you get lucky. So I'm just wondering if the water's low enough and you're pretty much dragging the canoe down the river, do you end up leaving the heavier stuff there from the beginning of the trip? Just because it's going to be, if you're floating a mile down the water, that's going to be a long way if you're just pulling most of it for a mile down the waterway.
Our river hasn't gotten down that low.
Okay.
Yeah, there's always water in the channel. So it hasn't the middle of the river is always going to have water of it, or the channel is always going to have water in it. So it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah.
Because we do have folks that are very dedicated and they're very stubborn. So they take great pride in the more stuff that they can get. And we actually had a washing machine out there for several years, and they just did it piece by piece. Each year that they came back, they would do it piece by piece until finally there wasn't a washing machine there anymore. So
I love that. That's great.
They get upset too if the boat tips over and they lose all of the trash that they collected.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had folks that they will intentionally just use the boat as the trash can, and they will walk or wade or swim alongside it to get it. But we haven't had a completely dry bed.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
It's so interesting. This is Nick. I introduced myself in the chat early on. It's my first time on one of these meetings. I'm in California, and I organize our Adopt a Creek programs, and it's crazy to hear you all talk about these floating trash cleanups, because everything that we do is along small creeks, especially urban creeks. And the way it works with the agency that I work for is that we actually have our own teams that will go into the creek. Our watersheds teams will go through and remove those items like washing machines and tires that some of you have mentioned. But our volunteers actually aren't permitted to go into the water. And so all of our creek cleanups occur often on very low water creek beds, where they're just going along the embankments, picking up trash that is often lodged in some of the brushy and tree areas during high water events. So it's important for us to get that trash out of there so that when we do have a high water event, it doesn't end up in the waterway and just going further down the system. So it's interesting to hear about all these. That's so foreign to me.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Yeah, it's different for every group, and your insurance and liability and also comfort level, and everywhere kind of does it differently. So thank you for sharing your experience. Well, we're at time. Is there any last questions that anyone has? Okay, well, you can email or call me if you need anything. Have a wonderful rest of your Earth Month and all the cleanups, and it's a fun time of year. Busy, but fun.
Thanks,
for
everyone.
joining.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.